My girlfriend looked at me and said, "The baby isn't yours, it never was. I've known since the ultrasound. Don't make a scene." I didn't say anything back. I looked into her eyes and listened. I replied, "Noted." Then I picked up my keys, walked out, and closed the door without a sound. 3 days later, she called 11 times before noon. How one message, sent 6 months earlier, changed absolutely everything she thought she had secured. I was 31 years old, senior financial analyst at a mid-sized firm. I had been with Nadia for 2 years and 4 months. We weren't married. We weren't engaged. But we had talked about it, and I had believed that conversation meant something. I now understand it meant something different to each of us. For 8 months of her pregnancy, I had been the man in the room. I had driven her to appointments. I had reorganized my savings. I had declined a job offer in another city because she said she needed me present. I had done all of this without being asked twice. I had done it because I believed we were building something real. I told myself that commitment was measured by showing up before it was required. I was wrong about what showing up was buying me. The imbalance started quietly, the way all slow things do. Nadia made decisions without consulting me. Apartment layout, her mother's extended visits, her return to work timeline, the baby's name. Each one arrived as an announcement, not a conversation. I absorbed it. I told myself she was under pressure. I told myself that good partners give space. I told myself that the relationship would recalibrate once the baby arrived and the roles clarified. I was wrong, and I had been wrong for long enough that she had begun to confuse my patience with permanent tolerance. That was her mistake, not her character, just her miscalculation. The exact moment arrived on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. There was no argument building toward it. We were in the kitchen. She was eating. I was standing by the counter, looking at a bill for the crib I had ordered. She said it without looking up. That's the part one remember most clearly. She didn't look up. "The baby isn't yours, it never was. I've known since the ultrasound." Then she added, "Don't make a scene," as if my primary concern in that moment would be volume. I felt no anger, no pain. There wasn't even pressure in my chest. I want to be precise about this because people assume devastation must look like collapse. It doesn't. Sometimes it looks like absolute stillness. I stood at that counter and I processed the information, the way you process a number that doesn't reconcile, methodically, without emotion, looking for what it means downstream. What it meant was simple, every assumption I had organized my life around for the last 8 months was false. Not mistaken. False. She had known since the ultrasound. That was her exact phrase. The ultrasound had been at 13 weeks. I did the arithmetic quietly while she continued eating. 13 weeks meant she had been certain for approximately 5 months. She had accepted my rent contribution, my time, my declined job offer, my medical leave arrangements, and my emotional presence for 5 months while carrying information she had chosen to withhold. That was not a woman under pressure. That was a woman who had made a decision about what I was worth knowing. I said, "Noted." I picked up my keys. I walked out. That night I didn't call anyone. I sat in my car in a parking structure for 40 minutes and I made a list. Not an emotional list, a structural one. A list of everything I had connected to this situation, financially, legally, logistically, and I went through each item with the same precision I use at work when a portfolio needs to be unwound. You don't do that with feeling. You do it with sequence. First, the joint savings account we had opened for baby expenses. I was the primary account holder. She was a secondary signatory. I transferred my contributions, which I had documented separately from day one, a habit from my profession, back to my personal account before midnight. The transfer was clean and legal. I took out what I had put in, nothing more. Second, the lease on the larger apartment we had been planning to sign. We had discussed it. We had toured it, but we had not signed it. My name was the one on the application. Because her credit history made qualification difficult, I called the building manager the following morning and withdrew the application, politely, with 24 hours. Notice as a courtesy. Done. Third, the pediatric health insurance edition. I had initiated through my employer. I was in a window period. It had been submitted but not yet finalized. I contacted HR and withdrew the request before it processed. A simple form. 2 minutes. Fourth, the hospital billing contact. I had set up under my insurance information for the delivery. I contacted the hospital's billing department and clarified that I would not be listed as financial guarantor going forward. They noted it. They thanked me. That was a conversation that took less than 4 minutes and cost nothing. Fifth, the nursery furniture I had ordered, the crib, the dresser, the rocking chair. 2 of the 3 items had not yet shipped. I canceled those orders directly. The crib had already arrived. I had assembled it myself. I listed it that same week on a secondhand marketplace. It sold in 48 hours to a couple who seemed genuinely grateful for the price. I remember being glad about that. Sixth, and this is the one she hadn't considered, the parental acknowledgement form. In our state, an unmarried man who is present at the birth and signs the birth certificate becomes the legal father regardless of biology, unless a DNA test is conducted and a court order is obtained to contest it. I had done research on this during the pregnancy, not because I suspected anything, but because I am someone who understands legal exposure. I had not yet signed anything. I had not yet been added to any legal document as father. That status, which she had been assuming was automatic, was entirely voluntary. And I had not volunteered. She didn't know that I knew that. By day 3, the calls had started. 11 before noon, as I said. Then voicemails. Then texts. The texts began transactional. We need to talk. And escalated into longer messages that shifted tone every few hours. First, there was the version that minimized. You're overreacting. It doesn't change anything. Then the version that reframed. I was going to tell you. I just needed to find the right time. Then the version that appealed. You've been so involved. The baby knows your voice. That last one was intended to be moving. I understand that. I read it without responding. Then her mother called. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 11 minutes long. I did not listen to it in full. I noted its existence and saved the file. Then a mutual friend, Marcus, texted to say Nadia had reached out to him and was really struggling and thought maybe I should hear her out. I replied to Marcus with 2 sentences. I appreciate you. This isn't something I'm discussing through a third party. He didn't text again. Then, and this is where it became more structured, she sent a message informing me that she had spoken to someone and that I might have legal obligations regardless of biology because of my involvement and representations during the pregnancy. This message she sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I screenshotted it, filed it by date, and waited. The next morning I responded in writing. One message. I said I had reviewed the relevant statutes and I was aware of the conditions under which a man could be assigned legal paternity without biological connection. I noted that none of those conditions had been formally triggered. I noted that I had not signed any legal documents establishing paternity. I noted that I welcomed any legal clarification she wished to pursue and that I would cooperate fully with any DNA testing process. Then I said nothing further. The call stopped for 31 hours. During that silence, I spoke to an attorney. Not dramatically, just practically. The way you call a plumber when there's a leak, before the damage spreads. Not after. She was a family law attorney with 17 years of experience. In a manner so calm it felt almost competitive. She confirmed what I already knew. I had no legal obligation. No signed documents. No formal acknowledgement. No court order. She said, "You're in a cleaner position than most men who come to me in this situation." I asked her what the messiest part of my situation was. She said, "The emotional expectation, not the legal one." I told her I was managing that. She seemed to believe me. She also told me something I hadn't fully considered, that Nadia's communication pattern, specifically the message referencing legal obligations, sent at 11:47 p.m., could be documented as an attempt to establish financial pressure through implied legal threat. Not necessarily actionable, but worth noting. I noted it. I left that meeting with a simple understanding. My exposure was minimal. My documentation was solid. And the only risk remaining was the one I chose to take voluntarily. I chose not to take it. 2 weeks passed. Nadia's approach evolved. The personal appeals slowed. The structured communication increased. She had clearly spoken to someone who advised her to be more careful with what she put in writing. The messages became more measured. She asked, in formal terms, whether I would be willing to participate in mediation. I replied that I had no legal obligation requiring mediation and that I was not opposed to a direct conversation if she wanted to have one. She did not respond to that offer. Then she showed up at my building. I saw her on the intercom screen. She was visibly uncomfortable, the pregnancy was advanced, and the walk from her car had been effort. I felt something watching that. Not guilt, not softness, something closer. To regret about the situation's structure that it had arrived at this point at all. But I did not confuse that feeling with obligation. I buzzed her in. I met her in the lobby, not my apartment. That was intentional. She sat across from me in one of the lobby chairs, and she looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. Then she said, "I thought you'd be angrier." I said, "I know." She said, "I thought you needed me more than you did." I said nothing. She said, "I was wrong about that." I said, "Yes." She asked if there was anything I wanted to say. I told her that I hoped the delivery went smoothly and that the baby would be healthy. I meant both things. She searched my face for something else and didn't find it. After a few minutes, she stood. I walked her to the door. She left. That was the last time I saw her. There is a precision to the aftermath of something like this that people don't discuss because it doesn't perform well in the story format they're used to. The story format says conflict, then explosion, then resolution. The real format is quieter. It's logistical. It's the removal of someone's name from your emergency contact. It's the redirect of your mail. It's the cancellation of a subscription to a streaming service that you shared and she used more than you did. It's the night you sleep through without your phone making noise, and you realize the noise had become so constant you'd stopped noticing it until it stopped. I moved within 45 days. Not fleeing, upgrading. I had been planning a move anyway, before all of this. The city offer I had declined came back through a different channel. A different firm, slightly better terms. I said yes. I gave notice at work. I began packing the apartment I had lived in for 3 years. And I found, while packing, that very little of what was there was hers, and very much of what was there was mine. I had built that apartment. She had occupied it. There is a difference. What I missed was not Nadia. What I missed was the idea that I had been accurately seen by someone who chose to stay. That is a different loss than the loss of a person. It is the loss of a conclusion you had already accepted as true. The final message from her came 43 days after the Tuesday in the kitchen. She sent it at 2 a.m., which told me it was not planned. She said only this: "She looks healthy. I wanted you to know." She didn't use my name. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't add anything after it. I read it once. I didn't reply. I set the phone down and went back to sleep. I don't know if that message was an apology. I don't know if it was a door being left open. I don't know if she sent it because she felt I deserved to know, or because she needed to tell someone and I was the person who had been closest to the anticipation of that moment. I gave up trying to interpret it. Interpretation requires data I don't have access to. What I have access to is what she said and what she did. I work with what's in front of me. A daughter, healthy, somewhere in a city I'm leaving, with a father I'll never know and a mother who misjudged, one time, in a way that altered everything. Here is what I know about leverage. Most people think leverage is what you have over someone else. They're wrong. Leverage is what someone else believes you can't survive without. When that belief is incorrect, when they've built a strategy on a foundation that doesn't exist, the structure doesn't shake. It simply isn't there. And when they push on it, there is nothing to push against. Nadia didn't lose because she was dishonest. She lost because she was inaccurate. She had constructed a model of me that required me to need her more than I needed clarity. When I chose clarity, her model had no contingency. That's not cruelty. That's math. The thing about calm people is that the world consistently misreads them. The world sees calm and assumes weakness. It assumes that the absence of noise means the absence of position. It assumes that someone who doesn't argue has nothing to argue from. These are all wrong. Calm is not passivity. Calm is the state of someone who has already decided and has nothing left to perform. I had already decided. I just hadn't announced it. And the people who wait for the announcement before they take someone seriously, those are the people most surprised by the outcome. So here is the question I want you to sit with. Not about Nadia. Not about me. About you. If someone in your life has been treating your patience as permanent tolerance, if someone has been building their plans on the assumption that your silence means consent, what have you been silent about? And more importantly, when they find out that your silence was not agreement but preparation, will you be able to say, honestly, that your actions were precise without being punishing? That you responded to what was real, not what felt satisfying. Because that is the line. That is the only line that matters. There is a version of this story where I become something harder than I started. There is a version where I carry this forward and it colors everything. Every new room I walk into, every woman I eventually sit across from at dinner, every conversation about the future. That version is available to me. I can feel its pull. It is the version where this event becomes the event, the story I tell myself about what people are. I chose not to live in that version. Not because I'm generous. Because I'm strategic. Bitterness is expensive. It costs you rooms before you enter them. It costs you information because it makes you stop being curious. It costs you the ability to be wrong about someone new, and the ability to be wrong about someone new is the only thing that makes something new possible. Nadia made a calculation. It was wrong. I made a different calculation. So far, mine is holding. The final thing I want to say is this. Everyone in this story did what they believed was rational given what they knew. She believed I was more entangled than I was. I believed she was more honest than she was. We were both working with incomplete information and making decisions on the basis of what we assumed the other person would do. That is not a tragedy. That is Tuesday. That is every relationship that has ever existed between two people who are not inside each other's heads. The only question that remains, the one I don't have a clean answer to, and I want you to notice that I'm not pretending I do, is this. What do we owe to someone we have chosen to love, even if that love was built on something that wasn't real? Does the love change because the facts change? Or does the love exist independent of the facts? And if so, what do you do with love that has nowhere to go? I don't know the answer. I know what I did. I know it was legally clean and logistically sound and emotionally honest. I know it was the only thing I could do and still recognize myself in the mirror the following morning. But whether it was right, whether any of this was right, is a question I leave open, because closing it would require a certainty I don't have. And pretending to a certainty I don't have is precisely the mistake that started all of this. The quietest people in the room have already done the math. The question is whether you've done yours.